Good afternoon. I'm a really lucky guy. Blessed in many, many ways, many obvious ways. This luncheon, my family, clients, and law partners that I enjoy every day. Some of my former law partners as well. Having friends like Bobby. Jay, not so much. But I want to focus not on those obvious blessings. I want to focus on a less obvious blessing. The blessing of tolerance and what it has meant to me. Tolerance, a fair, objective, and permissive attitude toward those whose opinions, practices, race, religion, nationality differ from one's own. Freedom from bigotry. Sometimes we have to strain to see tolerance, but it's out there, and we're all beneficiaries of it, whether we realize it or not. And therefore, we're all indebted to tolerance in one way or another. I want to mention two areas where tolerance has been a blessing to me in a place where you would not expect to find it. As you heard earlier, my parents immigrated to Dallas from Cairo, Egypt, after their family business was nationalized. And their parents were from Greece, Egypt, and Turkey. That makes me an Egyptian, Greek Cypriot, Turkish Jew. You need tolerance when you're an Egyptian, Greek Cypriot, Turkish Jew. After the Israeli War of Independence and Jewish businesses were nationalized, my parents, newly married, decided it was time to leave Egypt and make a new life somewhere else. And Arabs and Muslims helped them leave. They helped them take more money out than the very generous $50 limit that the Egyptian government imposed on Jews. It was Muslims and Arabs that helped them. And it wasn't the first time that Muslims and Arabs helped Jews. In 1492, when the Spanish royalty threw all the Jews out of Spain, the Ottoman Empire invited the Jews to settle in what are Arab lands and live among Muslims. Had tolerant Egyptians and Arabs and Muslims not helped my parents and my family, I don't know where we would have ended up. The other part of my blessing to tolerance is more direct and more personal. But before I get to that, because it's a great film, I hadn't seen it. The ADL, the 100th anniversary is also the 100th anniversary of the Leo Frank lynching. And not that much in the film you may have caught, it gained national attention, and Jews all over the country raised money for the Leo Frank's appeal. As you saw, that appeal was cut short when a mob took him out of his jail cell and lynched him. But not all of Atlanta cheered that lynching. Some publicly condemned it because tolerance exists in places where you don't expect it. The front page of the Atlanta Constitution on the day after his lynching condemned it. Lynching of Frank is Georgia's shame. Everybody in Georgia wasn't supporting that lynching. Some people didn't. The Atlanta Constitution later was one of the first papers in the South to endorse desegregation of schools. Again, sometimes tolerance, you have to look for it, but it's there. Anyway, back to my own debt. As you heard from Bobby, after stalking Faye for just a few months, not really a long time, we started dating, and I don't know whether she was in love with me, but I was definitely in love with her, and the time finally came. And by the way, for those of you that know Faye, she is not an Egyptian, Greek Cypriot, Turkish Jew. She's a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. And the time came for me to meet her parents. And I was nervous. Her father, William Barrett Howe, great big guy with a booming voice with 4 beautiful daughters, who, by the way, are all here today. And he hated every guy that came to see him. He had no use for any of them. But that weekend I went to visit, by the end of the first weekend, I had been completely accepted by her family. And I realized later there was no reason for me to be nervous, because her father judged people entirely by the character, by their content of their character, not by what tribe they were in, not what group they were in. And he learned that from his father, Clark Howell Jr., who was the editor of the Atlanta Constitution when it supported desegregation of schools. And he learned it from his father, Clark Howell Sr., who was the editor of the Atlanta Constitution that condemned the Franks lynching. Her family knew well the benefit of tolerance. They learned it well, and they shared it. So, as Faye and I are about to celebrate our 35th wedding anniversary, my personal big blessing of tolerance is the tolerance and acceptance that her family found when they met me. I think all of us are a beneficiary of tolerance, whether we realize it or not. And so I suggest you consider the important people in your life that treated you as an individual rather than what tribe you were in, what heavenly father you thanked, the percentage of melanoma in your skin, or some other irrelevant character to how you should be treated. So we can repay part of our daily debt to tolerance in the same currency that it's incurred, which is how I think it should be repaid. And Faye reminded me this morning of an essential ingredient to doing that. So I sat down to breakfast and I'm feeling pretty good. You know, my new ADL tie on, living large. I said, you know, it's rare. She said, well, what's that? It's rare for somebody to be a beloved, courageous member of the leader of the community and a world-class lawyer. I mean, this guy, the man to see when you have a problem. You know, and at the same time, a loving, charming, witty, handsome, sexy husband. And she said, you know, Brian, you're right. You're right. It is rare. In fact, there's one less than you're thinking of right now. Humility. Humility. It's very important. And by humility, I don't mean thinking less of yourself. I mean thinking of yourself less. Think about other people. Now, the best expression of individual respect, as I can't come up with, to me, is in To Kill a Mockingbird. And I can't come close to expressing what's in that book and that movie, so I'm going to plagiarize from it. And everybody's familiar with the story, but there's a scene in the book that's not in the movie when Jean Louise, Scout, is talking to her brother Jim about what makes different classes of people different, because their aunt thinks some people are trash, some people are well-bred from good families, from old families, and Scout is perplexed by this. And Jim is trying to explain what the difference is. And finally, Scout says, I think there's only one kind of folks. Folks. And of course, Scout is right. But it's hard sometimes to remember that. We all lapse into a tribal view of the world. I do. I mean, I'm a very aggressive supporter of Israel. And sometimes when I'm watching the news, I judge all Arabs and all Muslims the same. Then I think, well, what about my friends? Ahmed, he's a great guy, a great family guy, but he's an exception. And what about those Arabs and Muslims that helped my family when they needed help? And more exceptions. They're not exceptions, they're folks. They need to be treated like folks. My favorite scene in the movie is when Atticus goes, takes his office chair and a lamp and sets it up in front of the jailhouse. And he waits because he had heard that a mob was coming to get Tom Robinson. A bunch of men drive up, they get out of their cars, they say, Mr. Finch, you know what we're here for, we want him. Because they want to do to Tom Robinson what that mob did to Leo Franks. And then Scout and Jim show up. Atticus is trying to get them to go home while the men are demanding he releases Tom Robinson. And he's go now, Jim, and Jim won't leave. Then Scout notices that she sees one of the men that's the father of a friend of hers. In the middle of this cacophony, she says, Mr. Cunningham, remember me? I'm Jean Louise. You brought us some hickory nuts. I go to school with your boy, Walter. Walter's real nice. Say hey to Walter for me. He's real nice. Cunningham is transfixed. He pauses and he says, I'll tell Walter you said hey, little lady. Come on, boys, let's go home. And they leave. We don't get faced with that very often. But her treating Cunningham just as a person turned that whole crowd. And if Atticus hadn't sat in that chair and held them off, there wouldn't have been time for that. So I would urge you to repay your debts to tolerance in two ways. Treat folks as folks every day. And if you're so unlucky in your life that you get faced with an empty chair on the steps of a courthouse, take it. And take that chair long enough for, as Lincoln said, for the better angels of our nature to emerge. And if you're so lucky and blessed, like most of us here, that we never, ever are faced with such an unpleasant and horrible situation, if you're so blessed, then there's another way you can repay your debt to tolerance. Give generously to the people who look for those chairs, like the ADL. For your support and your friendship and your time, I thank you very much. Good afternoon.